one of the things that our athletes constantly talk about is when to adjust the strategy. Most of them believe that, again, given that the skill is within the similar range of the opponent, it's the team that does the better job managing and adjusting strategy that usually wins. And that's one of the games within the game that they love to play. So that would be like one of their pregame questions is, at what point are we reevaluating our starting strategy to see if we want to make any adaptations to that?
How do you teach that? Learn everything we can about playing and coaching beach volleyball. You are always welcome to visit our website, betteratbeach.com, where we have a number of ways for you to get better as a player and as a coach. We have online training programs for every skill where we can take you step by step through tutorials and drills. You can fix your passing, setting, arm swing mechanics, attacking, serving, defense, blocking, and practice planning. If you've ever asked yourself, am I really doing this right? Like I have for so many years, and I did for so long. Well, we created programs, and we invite you to jump into one of our skill-specific courses where we can help you erase bad habits and get more control of the game and learn easy strategies that can convert losses into wins. Our most popular online program is our 60-day max vertical program, guaranteed to add inches to your vertical leap, as well as speed, agility, and mobility, which will keep you playing for years and years and keep you healthy. So we provide online coaching and mentorship from real professional athletes and coaches, and it's perfect for people who want a coach to take their game to the next level. We would love to see you at any one of our 7-day beach volleyball vacations where we train you, we coach you, we hang out with you, and you get to meet like-minded people. And if you're like me and you like vacations to be active and fun and challenging and full of sunshine and new friends that are easy to connect with, this is the way to go. Come on to a Better at Beach training camp and we will hook you up with all of that. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe to the Better at Beach podcast and share the episode with one of your friends. Give us a rating. I actually don't know how to give a rating on my own podcast, but if you can find out how, would love to get that from you. Now, for today's guest. She spent 8 seasons with the AVP, competing in over 80 career sand tournaments and representing the United States abroad. She is well known throughout the sport and has worked with some of the top athletes and coaches in the game. She currently serves as the chair of the AVCA, that's the American Volleyball Coaches Association All-American Committee, and as the beach representative on the AVCA Board of Directors. She has led her team to 6 20-plus win seasons. The 2022 season produced the most successful national championship run in Georgia State sports history and a program-high 28 wins. In her tenure at Georgia State, she has twice earned the Coach of the Year award for her university, and in 2016, she was named the CCSA Coach of the Year. She is brilliant. She is a fantastic coach, and she's so much fun to talk to. So, without further ado, Beth Van Fleet, hello and good day.
Hello and good day. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Mark. It's been fun watching the tutorials and everything you talked about, putting them all together and getting to watch. And I'm really excited to be part of your show today.
Thanks. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
No nerves. So, you've got a lot of roles and you've done a lot of things in the sport, but today's a Wednesday and we're in July. What did you do today? What's a day in the life?
So I think I'm supposed to be recruiting in California. That seems to be where most all the coaches are. I'm here in my office and I'm also a mom. So today my daughter came to work with me because she didn't have camp. So just spending a lot of time organizing, looking at gear for the upcoming year, really exciting. And looking at some recruiting materials as we're getting ready to go out to California in a couple of weeks.
What is a recruiting material? What do you mean?
Just looking at the different emails. So there's so many different websites and ways that the athletes correspond with us. So going through the different emails to organize who's going to be in what tournaments, whether you're using one of the online Bracket Pal or Volleyball Life, looking at the different events that are going to be out there, who's going to be playing, when we can find them, where we might be able to find them. The recruiting scene for beach volleyball is really interesting. Some events are organized really well, and you can walk up to a court and figure out in about 30 seconds who you're watching. And some you can stand there for like 10 minutes, like listening for someone's mom or dad to say their name, or their partner to give them a high five and say, good job. So you never know exactly what you're getting into. So you have to kind of be prepared for all of it.
We won't throw anyone under the bus, but let's throw somebody over the bus. Who runs the best recruiting events, or your favorite in terms of going to, ease as a coach, and places to see?
So I love that question, and I don't think I can actually answer it because it would be endorsing an organization.
Dang, okay.
But I will say some of the most popular events for recruiting, the BVCA Championship, that's one that most of the college coaches go to. There's a bunch of events in Tavares, Florida that are really well run as well. So just kind of around the country, they're great. And I think the neat thing is every year they get better and they get more organized. And the athletes do a better and better job of letting you know who they are as well. So I don't know if you've been to any of the juniors tournaments, Mark, but you'll walk by and it looks like a triathlon. Like everybody's got Sharpie all over their
numbers everywhere, right? Yeah.
Names. Yeah. It's really helpful for us when they look like that.
Okay, cool. Well, when you go to recruit, do you have, kind of like when you go to a music festival and you're like, oh, I have to see them, and then I'll float around? Or do you go in with like a completely open mind and say like, I can't wait to see what I see today?
I love that analogy, the music festival. Yes, you go in with your hit list.
Okay.
But I will tell you, my hit list has gotten me to the wrong court multiple times. And I've sat there watching someone who I thought I was supposed to be watching to find out it was the wrong person, but I really liked that person anyway. So it's like finding a new band that you like. So yeah, it's a
This doesn't sound like the Lumineers, but they got a good beat.
Exactly.
Nice. What are you specifically looking for? So when you show up to one of those, are you looking skill, strength, speed? Are you one of the coaches that is like, yeah, everybody's got the same skill, but I want to see when you screw up, how you're reacting? What's the weight of importance between like this? Do you think you can fix players mentally and emotionally if they have the skill, or do you not even want to deal with that?
I love this question. I think you look at the total package, right? So you're looking to see, is someone moving well in the sand? Is their reach pretty high? Do they have a nice platform? Are they bettering the ball? Are they making the ball worse? Most coaches love watching how they talk, how the athletes speak to their coaches, how they speak to their parents. Like the little insight into character is really important. I think that beach volleyball coaches are really good at teaching beach volleyball skills and not necessarily good at like our training is not in
I agree.
Changing someone's character or changing someone's personality. And I think we absolutely strive to help everybody grow. That's part of any coach's job, but it's much easier to take an average athlete who has the desire to win and to grow and develop, that is comfortable with failure, than it is to take someone who is an elite athlete with a bad attitude.
Do you like to see somebody who's cool with losing? To me, like, there's this passion. Like, I want somebody to be pissed off when they lose. I don't want them to completely, talk down to everybody around them when they're losing and yell at somebody else when like nothing is their fault. But yeah, I would love to see somebody who truly cares. And I'm not, again, I coached NCAA for 2 years. So looking at that type of attitude, I wouldn't necessarily take them off of my list as soon as I saw them throw a tantrum when they lost. But did they go off and throw their own tantrum and kick a garbage can alone, or did they take it out on all the people around them? To me, I've kicked a few garbage cans.
Right. Like, how high can you punt a ball when you're angry? Like, I think that's an important skill.
Yeah, athleticism, that shows 100%. Good leg strength.
Are you left-footed or right-footed? Those things are important for us to know. So my dad was huge in my upbringing in sports, and he raised me with, show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser. So that's what he told me before every match that I played throughout middle school, high school, club, everything, because he was someone that was going to go kick over garbage cans. And I think I would just look at it like, this is a learning opportunity. And generally, I think what I've learned as a coach is there are so many different ways to approach competition. And coming off the AVP, very much what you just described, I was like, well, if someone's not losing their mind after they lose, they are not motivated to win. In our first 4 years here, I had this awesome opportunity to work with an athlete from Arizona. Her name was Milani Pickering, and she was so unfazed in everything she did. And I constantly told her she was boring to watch. She was so boring because she never ever looked like she cared. And after she graduated, she came up and said, you never understood me. And I was like, okay, explain you to me now that you've graduated and I can't help you with beach volleyball anymore. She's like, I worked so hard not to have an emotional response to a point, because if I had a blank slate going into the next point, I could get that one. And it was really I felt like I failed her, which was really helpful because it's helped me to be a better coach. But I think it helped me to also understand that a lot of people care in a lot of different ways. And I wrongly assumed that she didn't care because I wasn't reading her body language as caring. I was misinterpreting her.
Uncomfortable because I felt like you didn't understand that she was trying to cool herself.
Yeah.
So she prepped for the next point.
Yeah. But I mean, I do think it's important. Like when we're watching kids that are uncomfortable, losing a match hurts. Like that does sting. There's nobody that shows up to play any kind of competitive sport that walks out saying, hey, I want to go out there and lose today. Nobody ever steps onto a court with that mindset. And I think in the process is what's most interesting to me is, if you are losing in a game, are you still trying as hard as you can? Are you still communicating? Are you still strategizing? If you've lost a game, that might be a different response, because at that point the game is over and there's no hope that you can get the next point. How many trash cans? Yeah, like, are you kick a lot of trash cans around?
I'm a big trash can kicker. I tell this story a lot, and like luckily like my wife is really cool with it. But when parents or loved ones like try to talk to you right after a loss, I'll take this back to Casey Patterson, right? When he lost in the Olympics way earlier than he thought he would, he got real pissed. He walked off the court. He walked off center court, and everybody's like, unsportsmanlike, blah, 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 blah. And, I couldn't understand how people didn't understand that emotion at that moment. Like, you've worked your entire life for one goal. You're there, you're on the stage, and then it goes completely the opposite of everything you wished and wanted for. And then they want you to go up to another guy who ripped out your soul and smile and shake his hand. And it's just like, yeah, I get sportsmanlike conduct, and I get, being able to show up at that moment. But how do you leave zero room for, hey, here's your dream, and I'm going to smash it to pieces in front of you, and then be nice to me.
Right.
I completely felt for him in that moment. And he went backstage. He shook both their hands. He's like, hey, man, sorry I flipped out. Great match. Done. But I don't want to talk to anybody directly after a loss, directly after some losses. There are some losses that were like you hit some goals that you wanted to hit. Maybe it wasn't the win, but sometimes you're looking at matches, you're looking at partnerships, you're looking at teams, and you're saying, hey, what is our actual goal? Is it beyond this match, beyond this tournament? And are we building up to that so we have incremental goals for ourselves? Or is it, that we should beat this team? And so when in college, my dad never really got involved. He was always I will play with you. I'll show up. He goes, yeah, you want to learn baseball? I'll throw a baseball with you. You want to learn hockey? Sure, I'll buy a pair of rollerblades and try to learn how to rollerblade at 60 years old. But this one time, like after college, after a really tough loss, he just started talking about it. And he was like, you guys didn't have that energy. I couldn't understand why you're doing this. And I was just like, I got real heated. And before I completely blew up at him, I go, Pops, right now, you just need to stay quiet for me. You need to pat me on the ass, say, tough game. And then I will come and talk to you about volleyball and strategy and tactics and energy when I'm ready. But you need to let me like simmer for a while before I flip out.
Yep.
And my wife lets me do that. She at same thing at tournaments, all of her friends like, oh, look how sad or mad he is. Like, go help him, make him feel better. And she's like, let him
impossible.
cool off, then we'll come back. Yeah, that's why like in boxing matches they have that little minute break in between rounds. It's like go to your corners, literally go to your corners
in a moment.
Come back.
Yeah, it's so interesting because people process sports losses so differently. For me, the moment that a game is over, no matter what stage, how big or how bad it was, I am still in the moment of knowing I gave my best. And so I am pretty good for probably 15 minutes to an hour after I lose.
Wow.
And then as I start reflecting after an hour mark, I start having to monitor, if my daughter's around, I have to watch what I'm saying because the emotions start creeping into it after a while for me. So like, I think I'm a bit of a late processor.
Yeah. You got a slow simmer.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you, for your teams, for your college teams, do you have talks about the game directly after the match? Or are you the type of like coach where it's like, hey, let's get back on the bus. Let's go home. We'll talk about this on Sunday or Monday or whatever.
That really depends on the pair and the situation. And I'm very much like you. Like after a tough loss, the last thing I ever would wanted to do is sit there and listen to my coach tell me all the things I just did wrong and why I lost. Because at this level with these athletes, they all know. I'm not telling. If I sat there and reflected on the entire match, I'm not going to tell them anything that they don't know in that moment. And so oftentimes if we had, something that we were trying to accomplish, like, hey, we did this, our strategy was to do this, we did that well. This is why they beat us, or this is why they won, and just kind of open up the conversation for the pair that we're looking, or just that we're talking with. And sometimes they want to have a conversation and sometimes they don't. And it really, really just depends on, I think, on the level of the game, the level of disappointment. The one thing that we always do is after a win, we reflect on it as though we lost, especially if it's close. Because if you squeak out a 16-14 win in the third set and you're feeling great about life and you go run on to whatever is next and celebrate, well, the team that almost beat you is sitting there reflecting on
dig in and learn.
Then you're learning so much, right? And so you're going to play them again. And so it's better in those moments if you sit there for a second and reflect as though you lost. Like, hey, what are a couple of things that we didn't do well that we would do different if we played this game again? And then take notes on that for when you play that pair again.
Yeah. Why did we lose 14 points?
Right.
That's so interesting. There's like AVP, there's so many differences. For example, why do so many people stay at the top of the AVP? Is it skill or is it just repetition? Because you get all these qualifiers and qualifier teams, and I did it, when I was young. You show up on Thursday, and play one match, two matches against a medium level team, and you lose, and then what do? You go out, you party, booze because you're in a new city and you're in your early 20s, and there go the next 3 days without you playing volleyball because your flight's on Saturday night or Sunday. Meanwhile, all the better teams spend the next 3 days playing against better and better and better competition. So now you traveled across the country to, play for 2 hours and then waste 3 days.
Yeah.
You would have been better off if you stayed at home and practiced every single, 2-3 hours every single day, really.
Yeah. No, we used to, when I was in that process, I remember going to players' parties and looking around and realizing it's like, oh, actually the best players aren't here. Like this is everybody who is actually not playing anymore. And I remember I was playing for a little while with Sarah Lynn, and we would say, like, this weekend, are we packing to party or are we packing to play? Like, what's the place that we're going to? What's our draw look like? But one of the things that we did a lot in that process that I think has translated really well to the college game was, because there were definitely tournaments that I flew across the country, lost in the first round of the qualifier, and then was stuck there for the 3 days. So I would usually follow the team that I lost to and take notes on who they played, how other teams beat them, or how they beat other teams. And I had like this whole Excel spreadsheet. I totally geeked out on it, but had all sorts of notes on all the teams. If I would have won that game, the path that I would have had to play because I wasn't able to play for those 3 days.
You know how much you talk about like, or they used to talk about like Karch's Black Book, you know, that he had like notes on every team. And if you played on his team, you got to see them for the first time. I was pretty disappointed that I didn't keep stellar notes. I'm still playing the same freaking guys. You know, it's been what, 12, 13 years, something like that of playing AVPs. And it's like, I should have extensive notes. And I realized a couple of years ago, I didn't. So then I just started developing this, like fully question led thing so that our players could have it at Better at Beach. It's not complete yet. I think it's still like a month and a half from being complete.
I love that.
But it's got all the questions that you should ask before a match. And that you should ask after a match, you know, like, hey, like what strategy are we actually going to do? Who are we going to serve? Where are we going to serve them? And then why? I think in my 20s, it was always serve this guy tough.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't, now it's serve him short. Why? Because he's a power athlete. He likes a long run up approach and we need to mitigate his height because we're small blockers. So we're not really going to stop him from hitting hard unless we shorten him, you know, and we have to bring him inside because he likes to hit cross. So that's why we're serving him short middle. And it's like, that never happened for the decade of my 20s. So now I was like,
one person really hard.
How should we serve them? Aggressively. Great. You're brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting too, like going through those questions pregame and postgame. One of the things that our athletes constantly talk about is when to adjust the strategy. Most of them believe that, again, given that the skill is within the similar range of the opponent, it's the team that does the better job managing and adjusting strategy that usually wins. And that's one of the games within the game that they love to play. So that would be like one of their pregame questions is, at what point are we reevaluating our starting strategy to see if we want to make any adaptations to that?
How do you teach that? How do you, do you have hey, at this point, this is when we always check in. For me, it's like the technical. Like the technical is your first real reassessment. And for everybody who doesn't know what a technical is, it's the score when the total score reaches 21. So 11-10 or 12-9. And that's when I'm like, okay, we've attempted this strategy, or we should have attempted this strategy long enough to get at least some clues. Do you have a hard line where you say this is when we check it back in?
We don't have a hard line. I think it's really different if you have a coach, because we have potentially 5 pairs playing at once and only 3 coaches. So if they don't have a coach, if a pair doesn't have a coach in the box with them, then absolutely at the technical, or if one side takes the timeout before the technical. Okay. But then if you have a coach in the box with you, it's really easy to check in on the side changes based on what tendencies are starting to pop up. And so it's really one of the conversations I have with my husband very often. I'll be like, well, we asked them to do this. And he's like, what do you mean you asked them to do something? I was like, well, I suggested maybe we serve the other person to her sideline. And he's like, you don't tell them what to do? And I'm like, absolutely not. I can't tell you how many times I'll make a suggestion to a team and they're like, yeah, we definitely don't want to do that. I'm like, this is your game to play. I am just here to support you. I'll tell you what I see. I'll tell you the tendencies that we're picking up on. But ultimately, the decision-making and the power needs to be in the hands of the athletes and not the coach. So if I'm on the sideline, barking orders at them, they're not actually learning any problem-solving skills. And so I think that's where that strategy adaptation comes in, because by me suggesting something and them saying no or them saying yes, they have to have the reason why, that you just kind of like, why we don't want to change this because, or we do want to change this because. And I think that's one of the coolest things about this game is there's not ever a right or a wrong thing to do. And it's really easy, sitting on the sideline saying, oh, you should be doing this the whole time. But if you have a different read or a different feel in a game, that's important, that's worthy, that's valuable. And I think it's important to follow that until you realize it's a dead end and maybe the coach was right to start off with, or maybe not.
I like having players figure out. And I think, I think maybe like most teachers, most of our teaching comes from our failures, like our pains. And I think that my lack of paying attention to what was happening in game there, you get the end of the game, you lose on a cut shot that you missed, and you blame the entire match on that cut shot that you missed on game point. And so you go for the next week and all you hit is cut shots. And it's like, hey man, you passed to the back line like 5 times.
Yeah.
How many points did that lead to? How much did that drop your hitting percentage? Yeah. So I have 2 questions for you. Do you think that there's a type of athlete that with a coach can exist or be better now than before coaches were allowed? Because to me, somebody for so long who did not pay attention to what was happening in game, if I have a coach on my sideline telling me what was happening and what should happen next, then all right, now I can just go out and be a warrior, bang my head against the wall and do whatever they say. Are you seeing the same athletes as when you competed on the AVP, the same type of mindset be successful? Or does a coach allow a different athlete to be successful?
So you have all different types of personalities, right? And where we are with the juniors piece today, there's just not kids that don't have coaches anymore. They grow up from the time they're 12 or 13 in a club. They only play beach volleyball when there's a coach present. I asked at a clinic a couple of years ago, I was like, hey, how many of you ever play without coaches present? And so many of them raised their hands and I got so excited. And they're like, yeah, there's not always a coach on our court when we're at tournaments. And I was like, oh, okay, that's not what I meant. But I think, part of you in your 20s, part of it is ignorance has a little bit of bliss too. If you are overthinking or you're someone who plays better when you're not cerebral, then having a coach on the sideline may not be an advantage for you. I think one of the neatest kind of players that we get to coach, I call them chameleons, and they're very rare. It's a very rare breed, but they're the kind of person and the kind of player that very much already has a coaching mentality or a coaching IQ, and they can adapt to anybody that they play with. And I think that's really valuable now. So I think that person would have been the old school days when I was playing, the person who would have been able to really be successful without having the coaching available at that time. And I think that's one of the things we ask our athletes a lot. What information do you want from us? Because some of them want very little information. Some of them want to know what defenses we need to run. Some of them want to know what the other team's defenses are doing. So it's really specific what is helpful for each person. And I think in order for a coach to be effective, you have to know what that athlete or that pair wants to hear. Because I know from my indoor days, as soon as my coach started saying things that I didn't want to hear, I would make eye contact, but I would be processing or thinking about something else.
Oh, so you would do the respectful thing by looking at them so they think that you're engaged, but you mentally disengaged. Interesting.
Yeah. So, but I think there's just so many, what I'm learning now is there are so many different kinds of athletes that come from so many different types of backgrounds. And they all have this common goal of wanting to be great beach volleyball players. And I think, yes, there's the skills of bumping and setting and spiking, but then there's the skill of communication, the skill of vision, the skill of courage. There's so many intangibles that are involved in this game and this equation. And I think it's really neat to see how different individuals mix that. And then when you find a pair that really works well, I don't know, and I'm sure you felt like this, when you play with someone who makes you better and all of a sudden you're accomplishing things, you're I didn't know we could do that. I think that's one of the neatest, magical moments that this sport can offer someone.
Yeah, they're usually 6'9".
I was gonna say, or maybe that's how people feel when they play with you. I don't know.
For a long time, I was the opposite. I was probably too brutal. So you know how, like you said, you would kind of look at somebody, but disengage. When I've been hard nosed always.
Okay.
My high school was the Terriers, but like I would like go at things so hard that my college football coach, he called me the pit bull terrier. He's like,
Oh,
you'll
wow.
never let anybody off. And we're doing tempo runs, and I would always try to finish first. And everybody's like, we're doing 15-second 100-yard runs. Like, you don't have to finish first here. And I would always make sure that I finished first.
Yeah,
I was like, why not work as hard as you can?
It's a 15-second race.
Yeah. So I was pretty lucky that I had a few guys on my college team that we looked and acted similarly for hard work. Like Hudson Bates, who's now the associate head coach at Ohio State.
Yeah.
He's doing a lot of high performance for USA volleyball as well. But me and him, hard work looked exactly the same. There's like anguish on the face. You put your head down, and whatever you had to hit, whatever you had to sprint, squat, you just did it. Yep. And you made sure everybody know. Then you go to some other partners later on, and I probably ruined their relationship because when I looked at them physically, they didn't have the look of hard work in that moment that I associated with what it was supposed to look like, quote unquote. And I had to learn in a big way with like talks with my mom and a few other people that hard work looks very different from person to person. And you can't assume just because of the way somebody looks, or sometimes even when they say it or they talk about it, because they don't always know how to express themselves,
right?
That they're not working. So I was really, really, really hard on a lot of partners. Some partners really, truly didn't show up, consistently from day to day.
Some were not actually working hard, but there were some who were working hard, but they just didn't project it in the same way that you did.
Yeah, absolutely.
What a great growth opportunity too. And I feel like that carries on to the rest of your life outside of volleyball. I feel like that's one of the neatest things is learning how to read people. We had, very similar to what you're saying, Chelsea Rice, who is playing right now on the AVP. She played at Georgia State.
With Bonnet, right?
Yeah. They had a huge weekend in Denver. She was playing with Brooke Weiner, who was another player here. And Brooke communicated a lot. She wanted a lot of eye contact, a lot of high-fiving. And when pressure was on, she would talk more. And Chelsea wanted to be focused and calm and ready for the next play. And it was in the fall. We were doing a bunch of pairings, and we took a timeout. And Chelsea was like, Brooke is freaking out. She's so nervous. She won't stop talking. And Brooke said, no, Chelsea doesn't care. She's so quiet. She's backing down. She's scared. And I realized that both of them were amplifying their emotion to try to balance the other person. And it was the exact opposite of what either of them wanted.
Oh my goodness.
Like, well, this is a predicament that we're in.
Yeah.
But what a cool thing to discover in a moment of pressure. That wasn't actually a duel. It was a fall exhibition. But like those competitive styles and how people amp up or kind of back, kind of find a steady pace is really important to pay attention to.
And without somebody guiding that or being able to have that third conversation, all you think about, and you hold it in because you see somebody talking a lot and you don't realize that they're just like getting amped and this is how they fire up.
Yeah.
And you think that they're just nervous because people who are nervous talk a lot and they get fidgety, but that's not necessarily true. Some people who talk a lot are like finally feeling their vibe and finally feeling comfortable.
Exactly.
And imagine how many of our like adult players go through that, never get to have that conversation, never go through marriage counseling, therapy, anything like that, or, like psychology classes or sociology classes. And to think that you can go through and play the sport for 30, 40 years and how many partners you've just shut out or stopped playing with simply because you misinterpreted their physical or social cues.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It truly is. And I think the situation that you're in is, man, like I'm so excited for you because you're still playing and you're learning all this on the coaching side. I feel like I had a playing career where I felt like you in your 20s, like I just played. We ran ones and twos. We hit the ball hard if we could and served aggressively. And then I started coaching and I was like, hold on, there's a whole nother level of this game. And obviously then, since then the game has evolved tremendously as well. But I think it's such a neat situation for you to be in that you actually get to combine both of those things, because most people don't get that opportunity. And so I love that, you kind of referenced your 20s and you're like just kind of blindly hitting the ball. And now you have so much more of a why and a reason behind it. And I think like that's one of the neat things about this sport is that it is a lifelong sport and you're not finished playing in 5 years. You could play for 13, 14 years.
And if you study the partnerships too, the dynamics of a relationship, if you can learn it the right way, or if you could take coaching and partnership communications and convert it into your personal relationships, or you learn from your personal relationships and you take that onto the court with your teammate, some of the best stuff, and I say this all the time, but some of the best stuff that happened to me as a volleyball player happened in pre-marriage counseling.
Okay.
Reading marriage counseling books and hearing about how people interpret things differently, and how just because somebody's acting a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you see. You can't take it for face value. And how do you show up for somebody and give them what you need without expecting anything from them? And I know that so many people don't have marriage counseling, or they don't have a great coach that talks about mental stuff.
No, and it is, or, I did the math once. I think, so I played for 8 years and I think I paid to have a coach maybe 120 days. That's how many days we coach in 1 year in college. I think we do 128 or 132, something like that. Like, it's incredible. So as a college coach, in order to be great at what we're doing, we have to be more than just bumps and sets and spikes and serves. I think the understanding the communication and helping the people on the team to understand how to communicate with each other is so critically important. Anytime you're in college trying to get 16 to 25 female athletes to work together towards a common goal, and how can you have each other's back and lift each other up instead of trying to step on each other to be the number 1 seed in the lineup? I think like those questions are really important when you're looking at a college program. Obviously at the professional level, you're just looking at, one pair at a time, and that's so much more catered and tailored to an individual pair. But the communication piece is just as important, and maybe even more so.
I have that little kind of journal that I showed you that we're developing into something that we could give to our players or share with our players. It's going to be thick. I'm trying to make like this kind of giant Bible, but there's a start to it. And if you want to check it out, if anybody at home wants to check it out, and I want to talk to you about what you have players talk about before matches, because what's on the screen right now, if you guys want to check it out, it's called betteratbeach.com/partner profile. betteratbeach.com/partner profile. It's a questionnaire that forces you to answer some tough questions, and it asks you to have your partner answer them to eliminate a bunch of like the confusing things that we're talking about. One of the things that I always asked, and you might find this interesting, but I've done it with a few groups of men and women. It's, hey, what is the best way pre-match to fire you up? Do you want to be alone? Like I had an All-American on my team. He would put a towel over his head, and for 5 minutes he stayed under that towel undisturbed. No, everybody knew not to talk to him. Me, I was walking around there like punching people in the chest, asking them to hit me in the chest. Literally had a slap game going on, so like very, very different. But if you go around and you slap the guy who's hiding in his towel when he's trying to amp himself up, he's not going to be there. No. So it asks you to define that. It asks you to define turnoffs, and I'll get to the turnoffs thing in a second. But it also asks you to define things like, what is your best set? So if you close your eyes and you think, all right, it's championship point, 14-13, and I get served, and my name is about to get on the pier if I win this point. What do I hit? How do I visualize that game ending in my favor? And then it also says, okay, now it's 13-14. You know, the other team might win, but you're still getting served. What do you hit? And you have to figure out, you know, if they're different, because they shouldn't be, because at that moment, what you trust is what you trust.
Yep, absolutely. We say, what is your $1 million skill? What skill, if you were going to get paid $1 million to do the same skill precisely 3 times in a row, what would that be? Or what hit would that be? You know, same kind of concept of what do you want to go to at the end of the game, and how do you hit something differently early in the game so you set yourself up to be successful with that at the end.
Oh, I want to talk about that. Okay. So if you guys are interested in answering those questions, go to betteratbeach.com/partner profile. It's just a free questionnaire for you to just discover yourself, learn a little bit more about yourself, and maybe share it with your team, teammates, whatever you want to do.
I love it. I feel like this is your pre-battle counseling questionnaire.
Yes, it is. And when we asked the turn off question, what is your biggest turn off? It was interesting. When I asked the guys what their turn on was, how do you fire yourself up, right? How does your teammate fire you up? It was the mentality, and this is done with 2 separate groups. Okay, it's not a case-wide study, but 2 separate groups of guys, and they all aligned with the other team's trying to take something from us. It's you and me. I got your back no matter what. We're going into battle. We're going into war. Let's have it out. And that was their number one way to get going. Cool. For the women, this is all the open women. Their number one turn off, it wasn't across the board, but the number one turn off, most common, was being mean to the other team or overly aggressive. And I was baffled. And I was so glad that I learned that as a coach, because then as a coach, then I took that back to my wife. And when I'm telling her, you're not good enough, in the weight room, because that's what fired me up. You can't lift that. And I'm going to show you what I can lift. That completely, she's like, I don't like that, you know? And I kept thinking we can't work out together, because she kept getting mad at me. And it wasn't her getting mad at me. It was me saying the wrong thing to fire her up.
Yeah. It's the whole
but
concept.
It's so funny, those different mentalities, different things that work. And if you don't talk about that, you will literally make a great athlete into a terrible one and a terrible partnership.
Yeah, you can lose someone so quickly. And I think, have you read the book Top Dog?
I might have it. I don't know if I definitely haven't read it.
Because they talk a lot about the differences in men and women and how they compete and what the odds are and what motivates women to compete and how they compete. And in general, one of the things that they talk about is if you go into a pre-K classroom, right? So for the most part, kids that are, somewhat unsocialized, and the boys will generally be playing in groups, and there will be a clear hierarchy. There is one boy that's in charge. He's running the show, and everybody else is doing what he says. The girls will be generally playing with only 2 girls at a time, because it's really important for them to stay very even and to feel very even. And so I could see that, just thinking about that, if someone's being mean to the other team on the female side, it's a little bit against kind of something that's ingrained in what it is to be female. Whereas the guys, like you were saying, are all about bonding to go battle or battling to go bond. And I think that that it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to me. But it's a really great book about competition and how it's different between men and women.
Top Dog. I'm going to add that to the list.
Check it out.
Thank you. I love getting new books. Well, so long as they come in audiobook form.
Yes.
Okay, so what conversations do you ask players to have with each other before a match?
Right before a match, they don't really have to talk much, because all the work should be done at that point. Mainly because the way the college is set up, we know, going into this weekend, we're playing these 3 schools. These are the 3 pairs you're most likely to play. And we can do all the prep work for that before we even get close. And so it's much different from a pro event where you have no idea who you're going to play next. And so we get most of the work done during the week before we get there. And then usually right before a pair is getting ready to play, we'll review strategy, ask them if they have any questions, one of my biggest roles as a coach is to remind everybody to start their workouts on their Apple Watches, because that is highly distracting when someone realizes in the middle of the game they did not start their workout.
Start your workout on your Apple Watch?
Yes, you have to make sure that you have your workout started. Well, and then like so many different athletes have the Whoops and things like that that are tracking, like everything is tracked. And we don't do it as a university, but a lot of different programs have different tracking for rest and recovery and work and all of that. So those are really popular right now. So we make sure everybody's watches are started, and
all your players play with Apple Watches?
Not all of them, but the ones that do, they care a lot about their,
Interesting. Do you think those are providing a ton of value? I've debated getting the Whoop and the Apple Watch and like tracking it, but I go, you know what? If a watch tells me that I'm not fully recovered today, but I still need a practice, I'm going to go get that practice. Like, I'm going to take care of my body as much as I can. I'm going to get as much sleep as I can. Sure, a nice reminder will be there. But if something gets in my head telling me like the day of the match that I'm 60% recovered, like, how is that going to?
That's not helping you.
No. So I've for that reason, I've stayed away from them, even though there might be some value. But sometimes there's all that information. It's too much information.
It's too much. I feel where I am in my life, I feel like I know my body well enough to know that I would override whatever watch told me anyways. But I also prefer to like navigate without using GPS all the time. And so I think it's just more of like people that are dependent on technology. Like our old assistant coach, she'd crack me up. She always used GPS and would go through so many different toll booths. And I'm like, could you read the sign that said toll? She's like, I didn't see that. I was looking at the GPS.
Yeah, I don't know how my mom and dad still can't get to the airport from our house. Like, it's 11 minutes from our house, and they did it for 40 years without the GPS.
Right.
Now it's like, guys, you turned this off. All right.
Yeah. Digressing. But I think that generally before a match, we'll just kind of review strategy and check in with each person. And I think it's important because some players will get nervous before every game, and some players don't ever get nervous before any game. And then some players sometimes will be nervous and sometimes they won't be nervous, or sometimes they'll feel great, or sometimes their stomach will hurt. And so we do like a little check-in, hey, where are you? How are you feeling? Do you need anything from each other right now? And it's more of connecting as a partnership right before we play, review the strategy, and then go out and start competing, and then working through that, kind of what we talked about before, is cataloging and adjusting strategy as necessary.
Okay. So main questions for you, for your team, is strategy review. And I guess if you were to translate that to maybe a juniors tournament or a adult tournament, it would have to be strategy creation and review.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Create a strategy, come up with how you're going to play.
Yeah. Do you have them like remind each other of what their best X is, or what to stay away from, or is that part of the strategy?
We do all of that the night before. So like we'll do visualization, we'll have people talk about what their game plans are going to be, what's going to help them be successful. And we'll have the team actually say, hey, Mark, you are so good when you do this. Don't get bored doing this. They can't stop it. And the team will kind of talk to each other about what everybody's strengths are. Because I think that's a really unique situation in the college space, is you play the same group of people for so long. And they all, for example, we had a girl, Kate Novak, that had a ridiculous cut shot. She's a lefty, had a sick cut shot, but she stopped using it against us because everybody in practice every day knew that's what she was going to do.
Okay. And
so we started robbing her of one of her strengths. So that was something that I would remind her before she played. They're like, nobody knows about your cut shot. Do it until they stop you. And so like those kinds of things that don't happen in any other kind of training environment, because you're working with different groups of people all the time.
So I want to ask about strategy. I wrote this before.
Yeah.
Are there any, just one, I'll just ask for one.
Yeah.
A specific strategy to stop a specific something. So I'll ask you, like, in your mind, think of a player whose shot you're concerned about and you want to stop it.
Okay.
what would you do as an AVP player or a coach to stop that in terms of strategy?
I love this. First thing you got to do is think about where you're serving and how you're serving and what you're allowing that player to do. So we talk about you either dictate the offense of the other team or you disrupt the offense of the other team.
Okay.
So your serve should have the intention to do one of those things. And then I know a lot of the AVP players use a lot of different trap defenses and like late moves. And that's something that's certainly trickled into the college space as well. And it's been really fun studying other teams too and figuring out, oh, they do this and we do this. So we generally, I'll say we steal great ideas from other teams all the time. If we see somebody doing something great, we steal it, but then we name it after them, so we're not taking credit for it. But I think that one of the things that we saw LSU doing a couple of years ago really well is their defenders. Like they'll figure out who the attacker is eye checking. So if they're looking at the blocker or if they're looking at the defender, and then they'll use the person. So if I'm getting ready to hit and they know that I'm looking at the defender when I'm getting ready to hit, they'll use that person as bait to get me to hit into the block or to get me to hit at the blocker. And so I think just with some, little late jukes with the defender, if that's who the attacker is looking at, you can get, it's really crazy. It's like a little bit of a Jedi mind control. You can really get people to hit what you want them to hit. And I don't know that works at the next level, at the professional level, but it's really fun watching the cat and mouse game at the collegiate space.
Yeah. One of the first teams to publicly announce that they were doing that, maybe good, maybe bad, but they still won some championships afterwards. So people haven't caught up, was the Norwegian guys.
Yeah.
Andy and Christian. They said the first set is about trying to understand the other team's why.
Yep.
Why they choose to hit certain shots. Is it because they see a block opening? Is it because they see where their defender was? Brad Keenan, who's now the coach of Arizona State, playing the AVP for a while, he just said, well, if I needed to shoot or if I thought it was time to shoot, I didn't look at the defender ever. I just felt where the blocker was and assumed that there wouldn't be anyone because it's so rare that people double up.
Right.
Okay, so how does somebody know what an attacker's eye sequence is doing? Like, obviously you have to look at their eyes, but do you run a series of tests? I mean, okay.
So we have a series of different defensive series that we'll run to figure out, if we don't know already, to figure out who the attacker is watching. Our very basic general assumption is that blockers watch blockers and defenders watch defenders.
Interesting.
It gets confusing when you have split blockers, but it's really, in general, probably, I don't know.
You think bigger people want to hit?
Bigger people want to hit, but they also, if you're a blocker, then you know how to beat yourself, right? So if you're a defender, you kind of
say that one. If you're a blocker, so what?
If you're a blocker, because you said bigger people want to hit, but it's more of, I think, if you're a blocker, you feel more comfortable beating the person in your role because you know more of what they're capable of doing. Okay. Whereas if you're a defender, you might feel more capable of beating the person in your role because you know what that role entails better than what a blocker's role entails. And it's by no means 100%, but it's just, that's kind of where we start from. And then we see if we can prove ourselves correct or prove ourselves wrong, and then kind of go from there.
Like that. I've at one point I started writing down a series of plays to run. I'll run a standard line block where you put the defender in the cross and you put the blocker down the line. And then whatever swing they did, I have to keep one of my variables the same in order to actually run an experiment. So if I go to a 2 and I switch both people, I'm not really going to get a decent amount of information. So then, okay, I'll run a 1, and then I'm going to leave my defender staying in the cross, but then I'm going to run a 4 block.
Yeah.
Right? So now I'll try that. Now, okay, did we run an early 4 block or a late 4 block? If you ran a late 4 block, then he might still not have seen the blocker necessarily.
Right.
right? So it also depends on your timing. So a lot of those experiments, they're so imperfect because you could have a blocker who's like, I ran a 3, I ran a 4, we can't get him. And it's like every motion that you do is so obvious. Like when you're on the ground, we already see you leaning.
Right.
So they know that you're going to go that way.
And the other piece of it is how consistent is the set on the other side of the net? Like, is the attacker in a position where he or she has vision every time? Because that's sometimes they just guess, right? And so I feel like that's one of our general rules is you do something until the other team stops you 3 times, or you try it 3 times until you decide to move away from it. Because we think once is luck, twice is coincidence, and 3 times is skill.
Okay.
I don't know. Just a general rule of
Same
thumb.
thing 3 times. And that might, okay. I like that. I think keeping those stats, and that's going back to like what I was saying in the early 20s, is some I never did. I never kept in-game stats. So when somebody asked me, if you would have asked me in a game, like what's happening, what's going on, what should our next move be? If you can't count in your head the number of cut shots that somebody's hit in that set, you're not there. So now I'm constantly challenging myself to say, how many times did they hit that? How many times did they hit that? And then if I get that number, great. Now, what positions were they in when they hit that, or what did we run? But I don't think enough players right now keep those statistics. And that's why I asked also that coach question of, are there players that, don't pay attention to stats like I wasn't, that the coach provides now an unfair advantage for that type of player, whereas somebody who is always keeping stats anyway, like the coach is basically a moot point because they're like, I had those in my head. Of course I know.
Of course I knew that. Tell me something I don't know. Yeah, it's really interesting because I think you can also get to analysis paralysis, right? Like if you're trying to think too much and read too much, you get to the point where as a player, you're too afraid to make any move. And so I think we try to keep especially for the defenders, you just catalog the last 3 plays or the last 3 things they did when they were in system, or the last 3 things they did if they were out of system. Okay. Keep it really simple and play in the present.
I think players probably become way more predictable when they're out of system.
Yeah.
Like when the set's coming from the back line, I imagine most players do something similar and repeatedly. I know that I've got like my metrics that I've created for myself. When I'm in trouble, I know the swings that I take when I'm in trouble. And, for the one AVP player that watches and listens to this podcast, I'm not even going to share it. So.
Don't give away your secrets.
No, but at least I have a plan because I also know that my transition offense dropped like 20% when I took the stats for my in system and my out of system, or my transition offense. All of my errors came when I was in transition. So I was like, I have to stop the bleeding before I can actually improve the situation. Yeah. So then I just came with a plan of like, okay, let's do this in a safer way so that there's no errors.
Yeah. You want to play clean. You want to have a couple of errors. If you don't have any errors, then you're playing too safe.
You think so? You think in transition, you should, this is something I discuss a lot with coaches and players.
Yeah.
In transition, is the goal to get a kill, or is the kill a bonus?
Oh, I like this question. The goal is to win, obviously, to win when we're in transition. So that's a stat that we pay a ton of attention to. And that's usually, if we're citing out the same percentage, it's the transition errors that cause you to lose. So it's not necessarily the transition kills. It's that you don't, I guess that is. So then you don't want to be making errors in transition. But if you're giving away a bunch of free balls, then you're making it much easier for the other team to score against you.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between free balls and getting somebody uncomfortable. And I think I just practiced against Nick Lucena yesterday, and it was fun studying him instead of competing against him. In the past, I've always competed against him. This time I was just like, what do you do? Yeah. And I noticed that he's incredibly good at, well, I've always known this. His hitting percentage is actually, we're not going to say garbage, but it's not very good. He's never at the top of the AVP. or the FIVB in hitting percentage. But he's always had tremendous blockers and tremendous defense.
Yeah.
So he makes next to no errors. You know, like him getting blocked is rare, and he never hits out or into the net.
Yeah.
But he puts teams in such an awkward position. I think that he had Phil for a while. He had FIVB for a while. And and Theo, who's a monster blocker, that he just got the other team in enough trouble where he could be in a better situation, or he led them into his 6'9" guy that was just like, see ya.
Right. Get the ball to that guy. Yeah. No, I think that there's so much value in that. And I think one of the neat things with him working with Brooke at FSU, like if you watch their team, you see that in how their athletes play too. Like they take big risks, but they're very consistent. Like they are constantly taking risks in transition, but they don't make errors. They don't give you points, but they get you really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yep. And that's grinding through an entire, I don't know how many matches you're playing in a row, but I've changed a little bit of my mentality where I never used to think that people actually got tired during beach volleyball tournaments. I was like, there's no way conditioning plays into it because of how I trained.
Okay.
I went after it. I went hard, and I never felt tired during matches, ever. I was always the last guy, like, chest up, looking around, like, why is everybody bent over right now?
Yeah.
Recent years with injuries and then comebacks from injuries, then you're just like, oh, man, now I get what fatigue is doing to people. Yeah. And so teams used to serve Hudson really short. They'd serve him short, and he would crush it for the first set and a half, and then it would sort of like melt after that second half. But you had to wait a set and a half to see those results. And then every team did it. So he just got crushed throughout the tournament, so that even if you lose to him for the first match, you've put a couple of chinks in his armor.
Yeah.
So if you have to see him again, at least you gave him a good bloody,
Yeah, right. He's going to be tired. Yeah, I think that's and that's the scary part with the strategy, right? Like you're going to serve him every ball hoping that at some point he's going to get tired. But if he doesn't ever get tired, then that strategy is not a very good strategy to use because he's going to be lighting you up.
Yeah. I think you got to know that player. You can't always tell by like their body what condition they look in.
Right.
But some people look terribly out of shape and they just play super efficient,
Yeah, absolutely.
But that whole fatigue is now something that I invest in, not because of even the current match, but because of the second time I might see them in a tournament after pool play. For those people who are paying pool play, knock them out now. They'll pay for it later in the tournament when you want to beat them in playoffs.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the interesting things in the college space is the most that we'll play in a day is 3 duels. Whereas professionally, I think you might play, like sometimes qualifiers are like 4 or 5 rounds for men, I think, right? Like it's pretty deep. But the difference is in college is most of our events are 4, 5, 6 play the first round and our 1, 2, 3 play the second. So you're cheering as loud as you can, as hard as you can for someone for an hour, and you're playing for an hour. So it's like 6 hours of output with regard to energy and emotion. And it's really interesting to me how fatiguing that is, because we get that every year. You'll watch these kids play in juniors and they'll play the 16s division in the morning and the 18s division in the afternoon. And they've just played 10 matches in a day and they're fine. Like they're like you, like, they're like, why is everybody tired? And then you get to college and you're like, it's only 3, but trust me, there's no easy games, and you support your team for the other time that you're not playing. So it's like a 2-hour event, and then you get a little bit of a break, and then you run it again. But
I think we should train more like that. Like Harch, I was talking to, who was I talking to? Oh, Dane Blanton. And he was saying that like Karch changed the way people train. People used to be out there for 6-7 hours. Karch was the first one to show up with 20, 30 balls and go for 2.5 hours hard reps in a row. And everybody after him, he was the one, everybody after him started like training for that 2.5 hour time block. But when you're in a tournament, especially AVP tournament, you have to play in the morning. Then you take a 2-hour break. You have to restart the engine. Then you take an hour break. You have to learn how to restart the engine. So I try to space out my workouts now so that if I practice in the morning, I'm actually going to save my lift intentionally for the evening so that I can train to restart, to get those engines going again. Do you think that that's how you should train, or is that 2 to 3 hour block all in a row? Is that enough?
I think a lot of the times, especially for people, like when I was playing on the AVP, I had to work a real job as well. So I didn't have the luxury of, being able to train in the morning and lift in the afternoon or whatever. So I think oftentimes it's what your time allows you to do. But if you have the ability to train, I know we've gotten to work with people from across the world, and a lot of countries will train for an hour and then take 2 hours off and then go train for an hour again, because that's almost exactly like a tournament. And so I think there's value in that. And the way that we set up our training, like most of the college teams will do exactly what you do. So they'll lift or condition in the morning and then they'll practice in the afternoon, so that you are in that habit of kind of on and off. And then as we get closer to our season, just like you, I'm sure just like you guys do as well, like when you're playing other tournaments, that's the best type of training for a tournament is on and off and on and off. But I think it's really helpful. I think it's really important to have the same routine. So you might have your first game day warm up of the morning, and that might be a lot more intense than your subsequent games. But to have that workout or that routine before you play be the same. So if it's going to be 15 minutes, this is what we're doing in those 15 minutes, and that's structured and it's similar, then that I think triggers your body for that same kind of output for an event or for a match.
It stinks, I think, for a lot of people that you don't have that time. The world is real, unfortunately. So it's like 75 hard. There's a challenge that makes you work out twice a day. It's not easy for people, but even if they did do, like one of their practices or one of their lifts, and then find 15 minutes or 20 minutes to restart your engine somehow, like later in the day, whether it's a quick interval sprint at like 80%, 90%, something that teaches you that once as a volleyball player, once is not enough.
Yeah. You don't want to only play one time in a day. That's never a good thing.
Right. Okay. So Beth, as a player, as an AVP player, were there things that you were doing then that you look at as a coach now and you go, ugh, I can't believe it took me this long. I can't believe I only learned this as a coach. My players have such an advantage, and if I had that, I would have been better.
Yes and no. The complexity of offensive systems and defensive systems has developed so much since I played, but it all seems like common sense. So I don't know why we didn't figure it out then. I remember we would try to run plays where we were passing wide, like a lot of what the wide pass and the option play, like we would play around with that in practice, but we never had the courage or maybe ball control to run it in competition. But I felt like when I was competing, I got really lucky and was able to work with some incredible coaches. And every single time I worked with a coach, I felt like I learned something new that I would be able to incorporate into my own practices for the next couple of weeks. And so I think like that commitment to learning is consistent and has been consistent, but it's just, it makes me kind of crazy. Like when we played, we ran one of 3 defenses 100% of the time. Like we didn't have any kind of variation. It was really tricky if we ran a back set, and so I think now so many systems have, switched to mimic a little bit more of the indoor offense of the zones 1 through 5 and the tempo with the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Like it is, I think for a long time as a player, I was so excited of how messy beach could be that I loved that. Like I loved kind of seeing like, what can we get ourselves out of? Like how out of system can we be and still be successful, because coming from an indoor background, you can't get out of system. Like if your machine is not working, it's not successful. And so I think I may have been resistant for a while of really trying to be more methodical in the beach game, but that's what it's evolving to. And I think it's a really fun way of doing it as well. But yeah, so when I look back at my career, we truly, like, we ran 1s and 2s, and the 2 was the current day 4. And then
you never ran just a natural 2?
No, never would. No. We ran we ran a 1 and a 4, and then we had one play
natural
where
2, unless you got a really short hitter that likes to bang.
Yeah.
That's the only time I'll do. When I know someone's too short or they can't jump high enough, but they want to,
right,
and they want to bang, I'm like, come on, you're going to tape it. I'm going to get a free ball.
A natural 2 is good for the ego players, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, we felt like we were really ahead of the curve because we had one defense that we intentionally doubled up. And we're like, oh, this is going to, and it is crazy how many times we would score when we would double up on our defense. And that at that time, we never thought, hey, let's see how we can develop this in other ways. We're like, no, this is it. We got really fancy. We have 3 defenses instead of, so I think that's something, just looking back, especially with how much time I committed to learning and trying to understand the game, that it never occurred to me to kind of push some of those walls or push some of those barriers.
Were you getting coached at that time, or was that just all self-discovery?
So I would generally save money and get a coach every couple of weeks, but I had the opportunity to work with Todd Maddox, and he coached at the Bishop School in San Diego. And he lives in South Mission, where I lived, and he's like, I'd be really interested in literally experimenting and seeing, what it's like to coach a beach team, because I've only ever coached indoor. And so my partner at the time, her name is Susanna Manoli. She and I were like,
I know Susanna.
Yeah, we'll be your team. We'd be happy to be your team. And so he was amazing. We would train. He was a teacher, so we would train from 5:45 in the morning until like 7:45, so he could go to school. And we'd practice things, and he'd be like, if something doesn't work, we'll throw it out and we'll change gears and do this. And so we got really lucky to get to work with him. And his approach to the entire game was, don't let someone score on a bad shot. Like, if someone can hit a ball straight down, we're going to give them that. And that's not a repeatable thing. But what's repeatable is bad shots. So we're going to come up with ways to stop that. And so we just all kind of learned together and grew from there.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was those mornings, like when you can't feel your toes in the sand and the sun's coming up, and you feel like, okay, I'm already winning. Like, I'm out here at sunrise, and this is going to be a good day.
It's funny coming out to California, or like Hermosa, and you feel like a champ, You're like, all right, I'm going out for a 7 a.m. practice, and like I'm a ripped dude just on his 10th mile already going, and you're like, what? Like, I thought I was the hard worker here. And they're everywhere. Everybody's just like out getting fit and ripped and just doing it before work.
Yeah, it's I loved living in Southern California, just for it's vibrant. Like, there's always people out. Work was important, but I really felt like people would work from 9 to 5. Like, at 5:05, the Strand and the beaches are packed, and people are outside enjoying the weather, enjoying the sand and the sun. So I loved, and I fully understand I'm out here to get my work done, and there's 10 people that are working harder than me, and that's not what I came here to feel.
Right. What do you miss the least about California?
Oh, that is a great question. I don't think there was anything that I didn't love about being there. Like, I can't say traffic, because Atlanta traffic is equal to whatever is in California. So I feel like that was like a horizontal move. I definitely missed being far away from my family when I was on the West Coast. Like, that was hard. So that would probably be the answer. But I had such a wonderful chapter of my life getting to live out there and explore the entire world of professional beach volleyball. It was so much fun.
Yeah, cool. I had somebody who grew up in the Southeast, moved out, made a bunch of money, like did really well, and then he started saying like it's too fleeting. He goes like every one of your group of friends. He's like in Little Rock, Arkansas. If somebody leaves your volleyball group, there's like this hole that can't be filled.
That's true.
You know, and but he goes in California, somebody literally moves out of the state permanently, and they're kind of just replaced by another guy. And you kind of miss them, but then boom. So he just didn't feel like the bonding and the tightness of community was strong enough for him on the beaches of Southern California, like the beach communities, just because there's so many tourists or like 4 or 5 year people coming in that it's so transient, I guess you could say.
Yeah. But that's also, I think, why people move out there, because like we all moved out there for selfish reasons to pursue something that was important to us. And when you're in that mindset of doing something that's like chasing your dream, you're not there necessarily to make a bazillion connections. But I've always felt like the beach volleyball community is really tight knit, and I still have friends that I made in San Diego that I get to go back every summer. I'm so excited to go see them. But I can see that it's maybe less substantial friendships or connections that you make. But I feel like you know a lot more people out there in the volleyball. Maybe that's what it is. In Little Rock, Arkansas, there's maybe only 10 people in the volleyball community, and in California, there's 1,000 people.
Right.
So you know,
you can avoid the people that you don't like.
Right.
Like, you know, in certain towns, like especially the town that I grew up in the summers, like the guy that you didn't like, he's gonna be in your friend group for the next 20 years. So like just get used to him and deal with it. And there's something good about that. There's something wholesome about, you know, not just partying or being able to avoid that or that person.
You have to work with the tension. You have to grow up around that. I think that's important. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna wrap you up with a few kind of rapid fire questions. I want you to, I've never done this before, but I want you to see if we can do it.
Okay.
So always think of the fastest, easiest, or most common, or the number of times that you utilize this. Okay. Fastest way to fix someone's passing.
Don't try to fix it. Give them a new way to do it.
So vague. Okay. Fastest way to fix somebody's setting.
Okay, wait. The fastest way to fix someone's passing is have them hold their platform until the setter touches the ball.
So I'm looking for more like cues, specifically something that you can use and specifically something that
I got you.
You know, like a blanket thing where if you could give the most effective fix for looking at 1,000 people blind, and it would fix the most people's issues, you know? Okay. So
I'm ready to go now. We'll go back to question 1.
All right. Passing fix.
Form early, hold late.
Form early, hold late. It's always interesting to me, the form early thing, because there's so many high level players and coaches that have said, you know, I grew up in the keep your hands apart until the last second. Don't form like in the middle and then twist outside. And then, you know, even Dustin Watton, who's got some great online programs, national team libero, he said that the best advice that he got was from John Speraw, who was saying, put your hands together as late as possible. And for me personally, when I make the fix of getting my hands together literally before serve contact, I have my best, steadiest passing days. And so I give that advice to my players. Like, I would rather, if we're talking about like firearms, right? Would you wait until this object is 3 feet from your face before pulling your thing out of your holster and shooting it? Or would you set up your firearm and wait for a thing to be shot and then get it as early as you can?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think also just for the beach, because you want the ball to slow down, the more still your platform is, the more you can absorb. If you're making your platform at the last second, the most elite athletes that's a different discussion. But if I'm looking at 1,000 people and I'm telling them to form late, most of them are going to swing their arms into the ball.
Okay. Cool. All right. Setting.
To help someone improve their setting? Platform or hand setting? Which one?
Let's go hands.
Hands high early.
It's high early. Okay. Like up above your head, or like positioned by face or above forehead?
Pouring a 2-liter of Coca-Cola on your forehead.
Nice. Okay. Attacking.
Hard step close.
Like aggressive. Pop. Okay. And then the last one I'll go is floor defense. So ground defense.
Ground defense?
Yeah. So not like blockers.
Oh, okay. And how to make someone better at that?
Yep. Blanket statement.
Know what your priorities are.
Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. So in every defense, you have a primary responsibility and a secondary responsibility, and you want to make sure you're taking those two. If you're trying to take all of the possibilities, you are not going to make any plays. And so I think it's really important to know what you must take, like what is going to piss off your partner if you don't dig that ball, and then what you should get, and then know what you're leaving.
I love that. I love that so much. You see so many, I would say young and fiery players, but you see the same 40, 50, and 60-year-old players who they get so pissed every time they lose a point. Yeah. And then you see an AVP player who claps once after a clean kill and resets it, and they kind of, wave a hand at their partner and they're okay with it, knowing that the other team is supposed to score the majority of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're just cataloging. So they got that clean kill. They know they got the clean kill. They know they got the kill. What are they going to do next?
Mm-hmm. Yep. You didn't lose a point. You gained information.
Absolutely.
And a statistic.
So well said. So well said.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been on air for a while now. Cool. So, Beth, is there any other advice, or if you had a billboard for volleyball players, coaches, or club directors that you would just put up for the entire world to see? Is there anything that you would share for any coach, director, or player out there?
If I had a billboard, it would say lift each other up. And I think that this community does an incredible job of sharing knowledge and sharing information for the greater good. Now, obviously, we all have our little secrets and magic tricks that we don't necessarily want to put out there for everyone to know. But I think the more that we're willing to share, and this was something from my experience playing and now my experience coaching, there'd be so many times that we would be competing or training, and I would play with people that were way better than me, and they'd stop and they'd be like, hey, you're moving too early when you're running this defense. And then someone would be like, well, why would you tell her that? Don't you want to win? And the person would be like, no, I want to get better. I'm not necessarily here to win in training. I want to get better in training so I can win in games. And so I think when we take the time to lift each other up and help everybody be better, we all improve, whether it's as people or as athletes or as coaches.
That's really cool. And I've been in that situation. It's, sometimes I'll use it as smack talk with friends. I'll use it as smack talk. I'll before the hit, too early, you know. But then other times I'll let them know, because if I'm playing a worse skill team, I need them to upgrade. So it's not necessarily me being nice. I won't lie. I need them to upgrade their defense quickly if I'm going to train against them, so that I get challenged appropriately.
Absolutely.
But I'm not going to go ahead and tell Nick and John, you were too early again. I saw you leaning.
They may not need those pointers, but I think it's really helpful when we share information. And that's something in our practices at Georgia State that we encourage people to speak through the net to help each other. We definitely have games where you have to heckle and talk smack so that you get used to it in real competition as well. But I think also that might be the difference in the men's game and the women's game. Kind of how you said women, one of the turn offs was to be mean to somebody on the other side of the net, right? Whereas men, talking smack to somebody on the other side of the net is a fun way to fire each other up. But I think that we can still share information in those mediums.
Do you think, I just made a big post about this, about smack talk and getting chippy with other teams, and I love it. I think it's fun. I think fans enjoy seeing it. And then there is that a whole section of people that say there's no place for it, that it should be your skill, your sport. in my mind, when I really think about it, like, should you be jerks to each other? No, you should challenge each other. And I think that that's appropriate. That's also what I grew up with, was
Mhm.
just a ton of sarcasm and constant
Yeah.
challenge. But like the people who I challenged the most, I actually loved the most in my life,
Right.
so that was the norm for me. But whether or not you think it belongs, in my mind, you have to be prepared for it, for the sport and the
100.
world. Because if you can't, if words break your bones,
Yeah.
then
No,
sticks and stones are for sure gonna break them.
yeah, absolutely. I think people love seeing personality, and I think it's fun when you're watching and teams get a little smack talky, but then a couple plays later, they might high five or help each other up under the net. So I think getting to see the person and not just the player is really, I think that's super attractive to fans. And sometimes that is maybe not someone's best side, or sometimes it's their, cocky side, or sometimes maybe it's the humble side. But I think getting to see who the person is as a player is really fun. But absolutely, if you're going to play against a team that's going to talk a lot, it's really important to practice that. And I think across the board for colleges, we all do it. When you're going to play a really loud team, and we'll set up games where one of the roles is heckling, and you have to hug it out afterwards or high five it out or whatever your choice of washing it out is. But
Could get ugly, yeah.
that's one of the roles, is you have to sit on the sideline and you either scream like crazy for your team, or you tell the other team how terrible their decision making might be. Because if the first time you're exposed to anything is in competition, it's way too hard to figure out how to handle it at that point.
Yeah. And I think people do need some situation where safely they can learn a lesson that they have to tell somebody else when to shut up, like when enough is enough. That to me is something valuable for life. You have to be able to at some point stand up for yourself. You have to be able to at some point hear negative stuff about yourself and keep moving forward. And then it's up to you, and like how you want to react to it, whether you want to ignore it or put a stop to it.
Yeah.
Both of them are tactics, but it's a whole world within itself.
Or I think sometimes the best way to diffuse hecklers is to laugh at it, because there are some amazing hecklers.
Yeah, great.
And it's so much fun to watch. And sometimes you'll see the players engage with it a little bit and kind of play with people heckling on the side. And I think that's fun to watch, as long as the athlete can manage that without getting derailed from the game plan.
Yeah, there's a line of hecklers. It's like, if you choose to heckle, you're choosing to be a stand-up comedian, essentially.
Right.
And
You're
there
putting
are
yourself in
stand-up
the spotlight.
comedians that get booed off the stage.
Yep.
Like there are terrible comedians out there.
Yes.
So I do really appreciate the good hecklers, and the bad ones, it's just like, man, you're really more embarrassing yourself.
Right. I feel bad for you at this moment.
And that's a great thing to turn around and say to them.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think it's fun. And I think some of the most well-known players that were not playing at the very top of the AVP are well-known because of their personalities. And I think that's again, another unique thing about our sport, being as small as it is and as accessible as it is. I think getting to connect with someone's personality as a fan or a friend or family member is a really neat thing to do.
Do you think, I've debated this back and forth, do you think that the person who exists on the court is indicative of who they are off the court in a regular situation, or can they exist completely separate? Can you be an absolute jerk on the court and you would never react like that in a real life situation, or with family, or boyfriends, girlfriends, friends, etc.?
Wow. Yes, I think that you will see, it's very rare, but I think there are some people that can absolutely have an on-stage or an on-court persona that only exists in that space. I don't think it's common. I think if you're a jerk, you're a jerk, and you'll be a jerk with your friends and families, and you'll be a jerk on the court. But I definitely, I can think of one person that I got to play against that I knew really well off the court, and she would behave on the court, and I was like, I don't even think I know you. And she would never show a glimpse of that under pressure or under stress or intention outside of playing.
Yeah. I always think of actors, like I do think sometimes of sport as acting. There are some people who, and Janelle, my wife's a stunt woman, so she like gets to interact with a lot of actors and actresses. And she's like, they are the exact same person that they are on camera. Like they don't change at all. Okay. And then some of them, they're like, it's crazy how different they are from their characters, or how different, like John Malkovich, who always plays some kind of psycho. She's like, he was the sweetest old man. And he like asked me how my day was going. Like he stopped me and he said, hey, how are you? These snacks are great, aren't they?
Oh my goodness. That's amazing. Yeah, no, I think it is. I think that's such a great comparison, Mark. Like there's certainly, it is a stage and it is a performance for a lot of people. And they can have very private lives off the court that have nothing to do with how bold or big they may be in competition. I'd love to see it, the John Malkovich of beach volleyball.
Who do you think is the farthest person, guy or girl, professional player right now, from who you would assume or know they are off court? Like, where do you see the biggest
I don't know a
separation?
ton of professional players right now. I think I probably have to start there.
Okay.
But like the person that resonates, like the person that I immediately think of from when I played is Dana Camacho. Like he was this character.
How does he get into every volleyball conversation 20 years later?
Yeah, because of the personality. But then like off the court, he like loved organizing, and like it was just I remember listening to him talk about organizing a closet once, and I was baffled.
Cleanest individual I have ever lived with. I lived with him
for
a summer.
Well, there you go.
Ate like a bird. He would have literally a quarter of a grilled cheese sandwich for his lunch. I was like, what the hell?
Like that's exactly what we're talking about though, right? Like he's very different from one to the other. I think women that I played with, Alicia Polzin, like she was a huge personality. She's a huge personality in general, but on the court, she was very aggressive. She would laugh some, but in person, like she's wildly creative. She sews clothes and just has like this whole other side of her that is much more nurturing and calm than the person she was on the court.
Yeah.
She punted a lot of volleyballs. That was fun.
Do you let your players punt?
No. We've had one person punted. There's not a lot of punting in the college game.
Right, but like at practice, do you let them?
We would have to practice. Like you would have to be a respectable punter if you were going to actually get to punt a ball. That might actually be a fun fall thing to do.
If you punt it, it better hit the ceiling.
Yeah. It's got to go over the fence.
Right. I think that's a good rule. If you're gonna punt, there was one guy in Jersey for years. He would always punt a ball. He had like anger, but he was just a great guy. You would see him winding up for a punt, and the key is that if you were able to block his punt, everybody on your court had to buy you a beer. So people would like see him like start getting fired up, and you'd like really pay attention during the tournament.
Like, which angle is it coming from? How many times?
Great rule.
Yeah, punting. I haven't seen a good punt in a while in beach volleyball, but I think college is a lot more reserved than the pro space. I probably need to get back out to the beaches in Southern California for some punting action.
Yeah, I like a good punt every now and then. Yeah. It happens less frequently, but
yeah,
still enjoy it. Cool. Hey Beth, this is great talk. So easy.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been fun getting to learn from you and answer some questions. And I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, easy conversation.
Yeah, it was easy.
The internet didn't always work with us, but the conversation was flowing.
Hey, we overcame.
Yep. Absolutely.
Very good. Is there anything else, any projects or any websites or anything that you're doing, or something that anybody should just like be paying attention to that you're involved with that you want to share while we're still here?
Nothing that I think I'm able to endorse.
Okay.
But thank you for asking that question. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. And you guys can always go ahead and follow her. Her links are below. You can check out Georgia State University Beach Volleyball, of course, the AVCA, American Volleyball Coaches Association, and you can check out her as she leads the future of the sport as well as the current. You're one of the most powerful personalities in our sport right now, and it hides. But thank you so much for your service and the direction that you've given the sport.
Thank you. And I'm just super grateful to be in the sport. I think, again, going back to a story about my dad, when I decided to move to San Diego to play beach volleyball, he's like, this is the worst financial decision of your life. And at the time, I told him it wasn't a financial decision, it was a life decision. I had no idea that college coaching for beach volleyball was ever going to be a thing. And it's just crazy how life works out when you trust your inner voice and you follow it.
I like that. That's your billboard right there.
That's my billboard. Hear your inner voice, do as it says.
Yeah. Coach, Beth.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's been great getting to chat with you.
Thank you. Same here. Appreciate it.
Have a wonderful evening.
All right, we'll do. You too. And we'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.